Kira stepped onto the plane with a deep breath, her eyes scanning the familiar surroundings. It had been a long week of stressful meetings and late nights. A flight to a quiet destination was just what she needed. She walked down the narrow aisle, glancing at the plush first-class seats that awaited her. The business-class passengers were already settled, their conversations a dull hum in the background, but Kira's thoughts were focused on the retreat she had planned, a time for herself to reset. She reached her seat in the first-class cabin, the flight attendants exchanging brief glances as she approached. One woman, young and blonde, stood with a clipboard, a tight smile on her face. Kira nodded as she moved past, barely acknowledging the woman's gaze. She felt a slight shift in the air, a subtle discomfort that made her pause, but it passed. She was tired, after all, too tired to dwell on every little thing. But as she approached her assigned seat, a voice stopped her dead in her tracks. "I'm afraid you're in the wrong seat, miss," came the calm, controlled tone of the flight attendant. The woman was still standing near the aisle, her fingers tapping on the edge of the clipboard, as though she had nothing else to do but watch Kira. Kira blinked, looking at her ticket and the seat in front of her. The numbers matched perfectly. She was sure of it. "I don't think so," she replied, trying to keep the irritation out of her voice. "This is my seat." The attendant didn't budge. She looked Kira up and down with a cold, almost dismissive stare. "No, miss, you are mistaken. We've assigned all first-class seats. I'll need you to go back to your assigned section." Kira's brow furrowed. This wasn't normal. She knew the drill. A mistake was possible, but this felt more deliberate. She looked at the young woman in front of her, trying to gauge if this was some kind of misunderstanding. The attendant wasn't smiling anymore, her lips pressed tightly together in a forced, neutral line. "I'm sure this is my seat," Kira said, her voice even but firm. Her eyes briefly scanned the first-class cabin. All the other passengers were quiet, watching but saying nothing. It felt like the world had suddenly gone still. The attendant, however, didn't seem interested in listening to reason. She stepped forward, her hand moving toward Kira's shoulder in a silent command to move. The touch was brief but commanding. "I'm sorry, miss. You need to leave now. There's no room in first class for you. You'll have to sit in economy." Kira's heart began to pound. She could feel the anger rising, something in her chest tightening. This wasn't how things worked. She knew she had every right to be in this seat. She was a VIP member, someone who had flown with the airline for years. She didn't belong in economy. She belonged in the first-class section, just like every other person in the section. She could feel the eyes of the other passengers, their silent judgment weighing down on her. It was all too much. She took a step back, her voice shaking but still controlled. "I'm not going anywhere." The attendant's eyes hardened, and for a brief moment, Kira saw a flicker of disdain. Then the door to the cockpit opened, and a tall figure stepped into the aisle. The man was dressed in a sharp suit, his shoulders broad, and his gait purposeful. He moved like someone who was used to getting what he wanted, someone who didn't have to ask twice. The flight attendant stepped back immediately. "Mr. Anderson." The man stopped her with a wave of his hand, his eyes meeting Kira's. For the first time, his gaze was piercing, as though he were calculating her every move. "It's okay, Olivia," he said, his voice smooth and calm. "Let her sit." The tension in the air shifted. Kira's breath caught in her throat. She knew that voice. She had heard it countless times on television, in interviews, in advertisements. He was the CEO of the airline, but there was more to it than just his professional title. This man was her father. The attendant, Olivia, visibly paled, her eyes darting nervously between Kira and Mr. Anderson. "I didn't know, sir. I thought she was just another passenger." The man didn't acknowledge Olivia's flustered apology. His eyes remained locked on Kira as he spoke again, his tone now colder. "You're fine. Go ahead and take your seat." Kira nodded, silently, feeling the weight of his words like a heavy stone pressing against her chest. She didn't want to show the shock that was beginning to rise in her. She wasn't sure if she was angry or confused, but she knew one thing for sure. There was more happening here than just a flight attendant making a mistake. There was something deeper, something Kira wasn't seeing. She slid into her seat, her hands trembling slightly as she buckled her seatbelt. The hum of the engines and the quiet chatter of the passengers didn't drown out the confusion running through her mind. Why had the flight attendant been so adamant? Why hadn't she recognized Kira as the daughter of the airline's owner? There was no way she could have missed it. Kira's name was on the manifest. She was a part of the family. The last time she checked, her face had been on billboards across the city, at the forefront of the company's campaigns. She wasn't just a regular passenger. She was part of the legacy. The plane began to taxi down the runway. The feeling of takeoff, smooth but unnerving. Kira's father hadn't looked at her again since telling the attendant to let her sit. He had barely acknowledged her presence. Kira stole a glance at him from the corner of her eye. He was speaking to one of the other flight attendants now, his demeanor cold and distant. She couldn't hear the conversation, but it didn't matter. The silence between them felt thick, suffocating. She leaned back in her seat, her fingers tapping nervously against the armrest. Everything felt wrong. This wasn't just a flight, it was a message. Something was happening, and she had no idea what it was. She had to find out. The plane finally leveled out, the sounds of the engines fading into the background. Kira's father stood up from his seat and moved toward the back of the cabin. He didn't glance at her as he passed, but she could feel his presence, a strange weight that settled around her like a shadow. The flight attendants resumed their duties, the soft clink of trays and the rustling of paper the only sounds in the otherwise quiet cabin. Kira couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. It was as if the eyes of everyone in the cabin were on her, waiting for something, waiting for her to make the next move. Her hands clenched the armrests, the tension in her body becoming unbearable. There had to be a reason the attendant had treated her this way. But what was it? And why hadn't her father said anything to her? He was always so commanding, always so in control. And yet, in this moment, he had turned his back on her completely. The question burned in her mind. What did he know that she didn't? As the flight continued, Kira's mind raced. She tried to distract herself with the in-flight entertainment, but nothing could pull her focus away from the mystery unfolding before her. She needed answers, and the only way to get them was to confront her father. She stood up, her heart racing. She had to speak to him. She had to know why everything felt so wrong. She moved toward the back of the plane, her footsteps slow but determined. The closer she got to the cockpit, the more the air felt thick with secrecy. Every person she passed seemed to avoid eye contact, like they knew something she didn't, like they were all in on a secret. And then, just as she was about to reach the rear of the cabin, her father turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Is there something you need, Kira?" he asked, his voice clipped and cool. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The shock of the moment hit her like a tidal wave. Why had he been so distant? Why had he acted like she was just another passenger on the plane? There was so much she needed to ask, but she couldn't find the strength to speak. He raised an eyebrow, his gaze unyielding. "What is it?" Kira took a deep breath, her voice barely a whisper. "Why did the attendant treat me that way?" Her father didn't flinch. He didn't even seem surprised. He looked down at her, his eyes as cold as ice. "It's not about the attendant, Kira. It's about you." The words hung in the air, their weight sinking deep into her chest. She stared at him, her mind spinning. What did he mean? "You're not who you think you are," he said, his voice steady and calm. Kira's stomach twisted as the words hit her like a punch to the gut. She stared at him, her body frozen, trying to make sense of the cryptic message he had just delivered. Her father didn't explain. He didn't need to. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, alone in the silence of the plane, with her entire world suddenly turned upside down. Kira stood frozen in the aisle, her father's words echoing in her mind like a haunting melody she couldn't shake. "You're not who you think you are." What did he mean? The weight of his gaze, cold and distant, pressed against her chest, suffocating her. She had never seen him like this before, so detached, so distant. She didn't know how to process it, didn't know how to react. The quiet hum of the plane surrounded her, passengers shifting in their seats, the occasional sound of a drink cart being pushed down the aisle, but everything felt muffled. The world seemed to have slowed, the noise and movement fading into the background as her mind raced. Why had her father said that? What was it about her that she didn't know? She glanced down at her hands, clenched tightly at her sides. Her heart thudded in her chest, an unrelenting rhythm that felt as though it might burst her ribs. Her fingers trembled, but she refused to let herself cry, refused to let anyone see the turmoil that was bubbling inside her. What if he was lying? What if he was playing some twisted game, trying to make her feel small, like she didn't belong in the world he had created? But deep down, Kira knew her father didn't lie. He wasn't a man who played games. He was cold, efficient, always in control. If he said something like that, it meant there was truth behind it. A shiver ran through her as she slowly walked back to her seat. She sat down, trying to steady her breath, trying to make sense of everything. Her eyes flickered to the empty seat beside her, where the attendant had been standing moments before. She hadn't been there long enough to pick up her coffee or her tablet, both of which now sat abandoned on the tray table. Kira's stomach twisted as she stared at the untouched cup. The flight attendant's behavior was unsettling in itself, but her father's words made it unbearable. Kira wasn't sure if the attendant's attitude was a mistake, a product of her own prejudice, or if it was part of something larger, something her father knew about. She had to find out, but where did she even start? She didn't know what questions to ask. She didn't know if she was even ready for the answers. Kira glanced at her phone, her fingers tapping lightly on the screen. There were dozens of missed messages, dozens of calls from friends and colleagues back home, but none from her father. She should have expected that. He never reached out to her unless it was business-related, and even then, it was rare. She was always the one doing the reaching, trying to make herself visible, to prove herself worthy of his attention. But today was different. Today, it felt like she wasn't just being ignored. She felt erased, like the man she had called her father, for so long had never truly seen her. It stung more than she cared to admit, and she hated herself for how much it hurt. The flight attendant, Olivia, returned to the front of the plane, her eyes scanning the cabin as she moved past Kira's seat. She didn't make eye contact, didn't acknowledge her existence, and Kira found that to be just as disconcerting as the earlier confrontation. It was as if she had no place here, as if she didn't belong among the first-class passengers. Despite her title, despite her connection to the airline, Kira leaned back in her seat, the sound of the plane's engines filling her ears, a constant reminder of her isolation. She could feel the eyes of the passengers on her, some curious, others judgmental. She hated it. She hated that she had become the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. She wasn't a spectacle. She wasn't a charity case. She was a person, just like anyone else on this plane, but they saw her differently. They saw her as a mistake. "Excuse me, miss," came a voice, soft and tentative. Kira's head snapped up to see a man standing in the aisle. He looked familiar, but she couldn't place him at first. His business suit was neatly pressed, his dark hair combed back, but there was something unsettling about the way he stood. He was holding a small envelope in his hand. "Yes." Kira's voice was hoarse, the tightness in her throat betraying her calm exterior. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He held out the envelope. "This is for you, from the captain." Kira took the envelope, her fingers brushing against the paper. It was heavy, official looking, but there was no explanation, no reason why the captain would be sending her something in the middle of a flight. She tore it open quickly, her breath catching as she pulled out the single sheet of paper. Her eyes scanned the note, the words printed in neat, sharp handwriting. "Miss Anderson, please make your way to the rear of the plane at your earliest convenience. We need to discuss some important matters regarding your flight." The captain. Kira's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a formality, this was something serious. She could feel the weight of the words pressing on her chest, suffocating her. She looked up at the man who had delivered the note, but he had already turned away, moving down the aisle without a second glance. What was going on? Why did the captain want to speak with her? Her thoughts raced as she stood up, clutching the envelope in one hand and her seat armrest in the other. The aisle felt like it stretched forever, the distance between her and the rear of the plane feeling like miles. She walked slowly, her feet heavy with uncertainty, each step louder than the last. She passed the other passengers, their faces turned away, their eyes averted. They didn't know who she was, didn't know the blood that ran through her veins. The rear of the plane felt different. It wasn't just the shift in the hum of the engines or the way the light flickered dimmer here. There was a sense of secrecy, of something hidden just out of reach. Kira could feel it, the air thick with something she couldn't name. It was as though the walls themselves were closing in on her, drawing her further into the unknown dot. She reached the door to the cockpit. The stewardess standing by the entrance nodded curtly. "Go right in, Miss Anderson. The captain's expecting you." Kira didn't need another invitation. She stepped inside, the cool air of the cockpit brushing against her skin, and the captain turned to face her. He was tall, graying at the temples, his uniform pristine. He looked older than her father, but there was a familiarity in his eyes that made her stomach twist me as undersong. He said, his voice even, his expression unreadable, "Please, have a seat." Kira didn't sit. She couldn't. Her legs were too shaky, her body too tense. She stood there, waiting for him to explain. "I'm sure you're wondering why I've called you in here," he began, his eyes flickering to the small radio beside him before meeting her gaze again. "It's not about the flight. Not entirely. It's about your family, and your father." Her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a casual conversation. She had known that much already. The captain's tone, the way he had said her father's name, it all added up to something far bigger than Kira had expected. She hadn't been prepared for this. She hadn't been prepared for any of this. "I've worked for your father for years," the captain continued, his hands gripping the controls tightly. "But there are things you don't know. Things that he's kept hidden from you." Kira's heart pounded in her chest as she stood there, her mind whirling. What was he talking about? What had her father done? And why was the captain telling her this now, in the middle of a flight? "Your father's not who you think he is," the captain said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "And neither are you." The words were like a slap to her face. She staggered back, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She didn't understand. None of this made sense. The captain stood up and walked toward her, his eyes never leaving hers. "Your father has kept secrets from you, Miss Anderson, and I think it's time you learned the truth." Kira's mind raced, her heart hammering in her chest. What is the truth? What had her father done? What had she been kept in the dark about all these years? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. She was frozen, caught in the storm of everything she had just learned, everything she had yet to uncover. And the worst part was, she didn't know if she was ready for the answers, but she was going to find out. One way or another, Kira sat in the cockpit, her thoughts swirling like a tempest. The captain's words lingered in her mind, a cold wind that refused to leave. "Your father's not who you think he is, and neither are you." She could feel her hands trembling, but she clenched them into fists, trying to suppress the panic that was rising in her chest. She couldn't let it consume her. She needed answers. She needed to understand. The captain was still standing there, his gaze unwavering. His eyes were filled with something unreadable, and for a moment, Kira thought, she saw something like regret. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the same cold detachment that seemed to define her father's world. "Miss Anderson," the captain said again, his voice softer now. "I know this is a lot to take in, but you need to listen to me. Your father has kept things from you. Important things." Kira's mind was racing, but she forced herself to focus. "What are you talking about?" Her voice was hoarse, the words barely a whisper. "What secrets? What do you know about my father?" The captain hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you this. Your father is not who he claims to be. He's hiding things, and he's using you as a pawn in a much bigger game." Kira's stomach twisted. She felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet, and she was falling, free-falling into something she couldn't see, couldn't understand. She wanted to ask more, wanted to demand answers, but the words felt stuck in her throat. "Who is he?" Then she managed to force out, "Who is my father?" The captain shook his head, his expression grim. "I can't answer that. All I can tell you is that your father's world is full of secrets that have been hidden for years. And you, Kira, you're right in the middle of it." Kira's mind spun faster. Secrets, hidden truths. Her father, the man who had built an empire, the man she had trusted above all others, was keeping something from her, something dark, something dangerous, and now she was a part of it. She had always thought she knew everything there was to know about her family, about her father. But now, it felt like she had been living a lie that had been carefully constructed around her, one that had kept her blind to the truth. Her father's coldness, his distance, his refusal to look at her earlier, it all made sense now. It was all part of the game. She was just a piece on the board, a tool to be used, a pawn in his twisted game. But why? Why her? Why had he done this? "Why are you telling me this?" Kira's voice cracked, her emotions threatening to break free. "Why now? What do you want from me?" The captain sighed, rubbing his hand over his face. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Kira. I'm trying to help you. But you need to understand that you're in danger. Your father's enemies are closing in, and you're caught in the middle. You need to be prepared." Prepared. Kira's chest tightened. Prepared for what? The captain leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you this. Your father's empire is built on lies, Kira, and those lies are about to come crashing down. The only question is whether you'll be ready when it happens. Kira's mind was reeling. She didn't know what to think, what to believe. The captain was offering her no answers, only more questions. And as much as she hated it, she knew he was right. The pieces of her life, of her family, were falling apart, and she had no idea how to put them back together. She stood up abruptly, her body shaking with the force of everything she was feeling. I need to get back to my seat, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I need to think. I need to wait. The captain interrupted, his hand reaching out as if to stop her. You can't just go back to your seat, Kira. Not yet. This is bigger than you think. You need to be careful. Your father's enemies won't stop until they have what they want. And right now, you're in their sights. Kira froze. Enemies. Who were these enemies? And why hadn't her father ever told her any of this? She had always assumed that everything was fine, that everything was under control. But now, she didn't know who to trust. I don't know what to do, she admitted, her voice breaking as the weight of everything hit her all at once. I don't know who to trust. The captain's eyes softened for the briefest of moments. Trust yourself, Kira. Trust your instincts. Your father has led you down a dangerous path, but you can still change course. You don't have to be a part of this. Not if you don't want to be. Kira nodded, though she didn't feel sure of anything anymore. She couldn't stay in the cockpit with the captain. Not with everything she had just learned. Not with the feeling of betrayal so thick in the air. She turned and walked back to her seat, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. As she made her way down the aisle, her thoughts were scattered, a jumbled mess of emotions that she couldn't control. She could feel the eyes of the passengers on her again, could feel the weight of their judgment, the suspicion in their gazes. But now, it didn't matter. What mattered was the truth. What mattered was figuring out what had happened to her family, what her father had done, and how she fit into all of it. She sat down in her seat, the hum of the plane surrounding her, but she barely noticed it. She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears, could feel the pressure building in her chest. She didn't know what was going to happen next, but she knew one thing. She couldn't go back to the life she had known, not after everything the captain had told her. She had to find the answers, and she had to find them fast. But where could she even begin? The captain had offered her nothing but cryptic warnings, vague hints that only raised more questions. And her father had been silent, distant, cold. What was he hiding? What was he trying to protect her from? Or was he simply trying to protect himself? Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of the seatbelt sign going off. The flight attendants moved through the cabin, offering drinks and snacks, but Kira barely noticed them. She could feel her world shifting beneath her, like the ground had been pulled out from under her feet, and she was left falling, tumbling, into the unknown. The rest of the flight passed in a blur, the minutes stretching into hours. Kira barely registered the announcements from the cockpit, barely noticed the rest of the passengers as they settled into their seats. Her mind was consumed with the realization that nothing was as it seemed, that everything she had believed about her family was a lie. When the plane finally landed, Kira didn't even wait for the seatbelt sign to go off. She was out of her seat before the wheels had even come to a full stop, moving quickly down the aisle, her thoughts still spinning, her heart pounding. She needed to get off this plane. She needed space. She needed time to think, to figure out what her next move would be. But as she made her way to the exit, she felt the weight of her father's secrets bearing down on her. She didn't know what was going to happen next, but she knew she was no longer just a passenger in her own life. She was part of a much larger game, a game she didn't understand, but one she would have to play if she wanted to survive. Kira stood in the bustling airport terminal, the chaos of arrivals and departures swirling around her like an unrelenting storm. The noise of announcements, the clinking of rolling luggage, the chatter of strangers, all of it felt distant, almost surreal. She was there, physically present, but her mind was somewhere else. Somewhere darker, lost in a fog of confusion, betrayal, and fear. She should have felt relief. She should have felt something positive after landing, after stepping off the plane, but instead, she felt like a ship lost at sea, tossed around by forces she couldn't control. Her father's secrets, the captain's cryptic words, the coldness. In her father's eyes they had all left her spinning. Unsure of where to turn next, Kira's phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. She pulled it out, her eyes scanning the screen. A new message from her assistant, a reminder about a meeting with a potential investor. She should have felt something, a flicker of responsibility, a sense of duty, but all she felt was emptiness. She couldn't bring herself to care about the meeting, about the future of the airline. Not now, not when everything she thought she knew about her family was crumbling around her. She shoved the phone back in her pocket and walked toward the exit, her pace slow, her mind still racing. The fresh air outside hit her like a wave, sharp and cold, but it did nothing to clear the fog in her head. She needed answers. She needed to know what had happened, what her father had been hiding from her all these years. She made her way to the car waiting for her outside, the driver opening the door for her without a word. Kira slid into the back seat, her eyes staring blankly out the window as the car pulled away from the airport. The world outside seemed to move in slow motion, the lights of the city flashing past in a blur, but inside the car, time seemed to stand still. "Miss Anderson," the driver's voice broke through her thoughts. "Your father's office called. They're expecting you for a meeting." Kira didn't respond right away. She wasn't ready to face him. She wasn't ready to confront the man who had been the center of her world, the man she had trusted above all others, only to have the rug pulled out from under her. She didn't know what to say to him. She didn't know how to look at him anymore. "I'll go home first," Kira said finally, her voice distant. "I need some time." The driver nodded, but Kira could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She couldn't avoid it forever. She had to face her father. She had to get to the bottom of this, no matter how much it terrified her. The ride to her apartment felt like an eternity, the silence in the car thick with unspoken words. When they finally arrived, Kira stepped out of the car, her legs shaky, her mind still reeling. She had to be strong. She had to find the courage to confront her father, to ask him the questions that had been burning in her chest since the moment she stepped onto that plane. But as she stood outside her apartment building, staring up at the windows, she realized just how unprepared she was. Her phone buzzed again. This time, the message wasn't from her assistant. It was from her father. Kira stared at the screen, the words jumping out at her. "Meet me in my office." Now, her heart skipped a beat. She had been expecting this, had known it was coming, but that didn't make it any easier. She stood there for a moment, her hand gripping the phone tightly, as if the message itself might slip away. She didn't have a choice. She had to go. She had to find out what her father was hiding. She didn't care about the meeting with the investors anymore, didn't care about the future of the airline. None of that mattered now. All that mattered was the truth. She had to know who her father really was, and why he had lied to her for so long. She turned and walked into the building, the familiar sights and sounds of her apartment complex doing nothing to soothe her nerves. She barely even noticed the elevator ride up to the top floor, the quiet ding of the doors opening as she stepped out into the hallway. Kira took a deep breath and knocked on the door to her father's office. The door opened almost immediately, as if he had been expecting her. "Come in," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "We need to talk." Kira walked into the office, her eyes scanning the room. It was just as she remembered, modern, with a view of the city that stretched out before her like a sea of lights. But the familiarity of it all did nothing to ease the tension in her chest. Her father was standing by his desk, his arms crossed, his eyes cold as ever. But this time, there was something else in his gaze, a kind of hardness, a sharpness that made Kira feel like she was standing in the presence of a stranger. "You've been keeping things from me," Kira said, her voice shaky but determined. "I know you have. What is it? What have you been hiding?" Her father didn't respond immediately. He just stood there, looking at her, his face unreadable. Kira's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't read him, couldn't understand him anymore. He was the man who had raised her, who had taught her everything she knew about business, about the world. But now, she didn't even know who he was. "Kira," he said finally, his voice steady but with an edge she hadn't heard before. "I didn't want you to get involved in this. I didn't want you to know." "Know what?" Kira's voice rose, her frustration growing. "What is this? What are you involved in? What's so important that you had to keep it from me?" Her father sighed, a long drawn-out breath that seemed to carry the weight of years of secrets. He walked over to the window, staring out at the city below, his back to her. "I've done things, Kira. he said quietly. Things that you wouldn't understand. Things that I'm not proud of. Kira felt a surge of anger. What things? You've built an empire, Dad. You've made this company what it is. You can't just throw that all away now and expect me to just accept it. He turned to face her, his eyes cold. You think this is just about the company? This is bigger than that, Kira. Much bigger. Kira's heart raced as the words sank in. Bigger than the company. What does that mean? Are you involved in something illegal? Her father's silence spoke louder than any words could. The truth hung in the air between them, a heavy, suffocating thing that threatened to choke her. She had always known her father was a powerful man, but this was something else entirely. This was a world she had never been a part of, a world filled with secrets and lies that had nothing to do with business. Kira, he said, his voice softer now, almost regretful. You need to understand. I did what I did to protect you, to keep you safe. Safe, Kira echoed, her voice trembling. From what? What are you protecting me from? Her father hesitated, his eyes flickering with something she couldn't. Quiet. You're in danger, Kira. You and everyone you care about. They've been watching you. They've been watching all of us. Kira's mind spun. Who's watching us? Her father walked back to his desk, his hand resting on the surface as if he needed the support. It's too late to turn back now. The people I've crossed, the people I've made deals with, they'll stop at nothing to get what they want. And you, Kira, you're the key. You always have been. Kira felt a chill run down her spine. The key to what? Her father's expression darkened, and for the first time, Kira saw something close to fear in his eyes. The key to everything. You're not just my daughter, Kira. You're more than that. You're part of something much bigger. A legacy that has been hidden from you. The truth, the full weight of it, hit Kira like a freight train. She staggered back, her mind spinning, her heart pounding. She had been kept in the dark for her entire life, and now she was caught in the middle of something far bigger than she could have ever imagined. Kira couldn't remember when she had stopped breathing. She stood there, frozen, her father's words echoing in her head, his revelation sinking deeper into her soul with every passing second. You're part of something much bigger, he had said. A legacy that's been hidden from you. She wanted to scream, to demand more answers, but the words stuck in her throat. Everything she thought she knew had been stripped away, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. Her father's eyes were no longer cold, but there was a hardness to them, a vulnerability that made Kira shiver. He was no longer the powerful man she had always known. He was something else, something she didn't understand. You've lied to me, Kira said, her voice shaking, but stronger than it had been before. All these years, you've lied. You've kept me in the dark. Why? Her father looked at her, his gaze haunted. It wasn't because I wanted to hurt you, Kira. I've been protecting you. From the truth. From the things you don't understand. I don't understand, Kira repeated, her heart pounding in her chest. What do you mean? What are you protecting me from? Who are you protecting me from? Her father's shoulders sagged, as if the weight of the years was finally becoming too much for him. He walked over to the large window, staring out at the city below, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. He didn't speak for a long time, and Kira didn't know if he would ever tell her what she so desperately needed to know. Finally, he turned back to her, his face a mask of exhaustion. The people I've made deals with, Kira, they're not the kind of people you want to get involved with. I thought I could shield you from them, keep you safe, but now, it's too late. You're already involved. Kira felt a surge of anger. She wasn't some helpless pawn in his game. She wasn't someone to be protected. She was his daughter, and she deserved the truth. She deserved to know what was happening, why everything was falling apart. Who are they? Kira asked, her voice low, but firm. Who are these people? What do you owe them? Her father's gaze flickered briefly, and for a moment, Kira saw something she hadn't expected. Fear. Not just fear of the people he had crossed, but fear for her. I've made mistakes, Kira, grave mistakes. I've done things I can't undo. I've made deals with people who won't stop until they get what they want, and they won't stop until you're— Kira's heart raced. Until I'm what? Until you're gone, her father said, his voice barely above a whisper. They'll stop at nothing to get to you. You're the key to everything, Kira. Your birth, your blood, your connection to this family. It's what they need. It's what they've been after all these years. Kira's knees nearly gave out beneath her. She had always known her family was wealthy, powerful, but this This was something far beyond her comprehension. Her father had been hiding a secret, a dark, dangerous secret, and now she was right in the center of it. "Who are they?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. "Why are they after me?" Her father hesitated again, and Kira could see the internal battle raging inside him. "They're part of an underground network, Kira, people who control industries, economies, governments. They've been operating in the shadows for decades, and I've been their pawn. I thought I could play the game, outsmart them, but now they've come for you." Kira shook her head, trying to make sense of the chaos swirling around her. "What do you mean, they've come for me? I don't understand. I don't even know who they are." "They know everything about you, Kira," her father said, his voice rough. "They know your every move, your every decision. They've been watching you, waiting for the right moment. And now that moment has come." Kira's mind reeled. Her entire life had been a lie. The world she had known, the world she had trusted, was built on secrets and betrayals. And now, she was in the middle of something far bigger than she could have ever imagined. Her father moved closer to her, his face etched with guilt. "I never wanted this for you, Kira. I wanted to keep you safe. But now it's too late. You're involved whether you like it or not." Kira took a step back, her hands trembling. "What do you want me to do? What am I supposed to do with all of this?" Her father's eyes softened, his voice barely audible. "You need to get out, Kira. Leave. Get as far away from this as you can. They'll stop at nothing to get you, to use you, for their own purposes. And they won't hesitate to hurt you to get what they want." Kira's mind raced, her thoughts a blur of questions and emotions. She had always wanted to be a part of her father's world, and had always wanted to prove herself to him. But now, she wasn't sure if she even wanted to be a part of his world anymore. The man she had once looked up to, the man who had raised her, had been hiding the truth from her for her entire life, and now she was tangled in his web of lies. "You want me to run?" Kira said, her voice cold. "You want me to hide? You want me to let them win?" Her father looked at her, his eyes filled with sorrow. "I don't want you to hide, but right now, it's the only way to protect yourself, the only way to stay alive." Kira clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to hide. She wasn't going to let these people control her, let them destroy everything she had worked for, everything her father had built. "I won't run," Kira said, her voice steady but fierce. "I'm not going to let them take me." Her father looked at her with a mixture of admiration and fear. "You don't understand, Kira. You can't fight them. They're too powerful." "Then I'll make them understand," Kira said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I won't back down. I won't let them win. And I won't let you keep lying to me." Her father was silent, his gaze fixed on her, as though he was seeing her for the first time. For a moment, there was no recognition in his eyes, only the weight of everything he had done, the mistakes he had made. He had never wanted this life for her, but now, she was a part of it, whether she liked it or not. Kira turned toward the door, her decision made. She wasn't going to hide. She wasn't going to run. She was going to fight. As she walked out of her father's office, she felt the weight of the world on her shoulders, but she also felt something else, something stronger. Her father had given her a choice, and she had chosen to stand up for herself, to face the danger head-on. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She was done being a pawn. She was ready to fight for her life, for her freedom, and she was ready to uncover the truth. Kira stood alone, in the center of her father's office, the heavy silence pressing down on her. The door had closed behind her with an ominous click, and she could still feel the weight of her father's eyes on her back as she left. She had made her choice. There was no turning back now. She could feel the storm building within her, a whirlwind of anger, determination, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Her life had been a carefully constructed illusion, but now the mask had shattered, revealing a world she wasn't sure she was ready to face. The cool night air greeted her as she stepped outside, the wind biting against her skin. It felt like a different world now, the world her father had kept hidden from her. Every step she took felt uncertain, but her resolve grew stronger with each one. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was going to take control of her life, and for the first time in a long while, Kira knew exactly what she needed to do. Her phone buzzed again in her pocket, and for a moment, she hesitated. The screen lit up with a message from her assistant, reminding her about the investor meeting she had scheduled for tomorrow. but the thought of stepping back into the life she had known, the life her father had crafted for her, felt suffocating. It wasn't her world anymore. Not in the way it used to be. She didn't respond to the message. She didn't need to. Kira looked up at the towering city skyline before her. The city that had once been so familiar now felt alien, distant. She had been living in the shadow of her father's legacy, but now, she realized, the true fight was just beginning. She couldn't do this alone. She needed allies, people she could trust. But who? The only person she had truly trusted her entire life had been her father, and he had been lying to her for as long as she could remember. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. She pulled it out, her eyes narrowing when she saw the name on the screen. It was a number she didn't recognize, but the message was clear. "We need to meet. It's time." Kira's heart skipped a beat. The words felt like a summons, an invitation to something she couldn't ignore. It wasn't just another cryptic message. It was a signal, a turning point. Someone had just made themselves a part of her story, and now she had to find out why. She didn't hesitate. She typed a quick response, where a few moments later, another message pinged back. The old warehouse by the docks. Midnight. Kira didn't have to think twice. She could already feel the pull of the unknown. The message was clear. She had to go. There were answers waiting for her, but she didn't know if they would set her free or drag her deeper into the shadows of her father's world. As she made her way to the docks, the city felt quieter than it had ever been. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long, eerie shadows across the pavement. The docks had always been a place she avoided, a place where the undercurrents of the city's darker dealings could be found. But tonight, it was the place where her future would be decided. It was where she would meet the people who had been watching her, waiting for the right moment to pull her into their web. She arrived at the warehouse just before midnight, the heavy steel doors looming in front of her like the entrance to a different world. Her pulse quickened, and she forced herself to breathe deeply. She was here. There was no turning back now. The door to the warehouse creaked open, and Kira stepped inside. The space was vast, empty, with only a few dim lights, casting long shadows across the floor. The scent of salt and rust filled the air, mingling with the sharp tang of oil and metal. It felt like the heart of the city, hidden away, a place where the forgotten, the broken, and the dangerous came together to shape their own rules. And standing in the middle of that dark space was a figure she recognized. Immediately, it was the captain, the man who had first warned her about the dangers she was facing. The man who had shown her the cracks in the foundation of her life. He was standing there, his back straight, his eyes scanning her, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. "I knew you would come," he said, his voice low but steady. "I knew you would make the right choice." Kira took a step forward, her heart hammering in her chest. "What is this? Why am I here?" The captain's eyes softened, but his expression remained firm. "You're here because you're part of something bigger than you can imagine. Your father wasn't just a businessman, Kira. He was a part of a network, a global web of power and influence. But now that he's made his choices, now that he's forced your hand, it's time for you to take your place." Kira shook her head, feeling a mixture of disbelief and confusion. "Take my place? In what? What do you mean?" He stepped closer, his movements deliberate, almost measured. "Your father's empire wasn't built on legitimate means. He made deals with people who have been pulling the strings behind the scenes, and you were always meant to be the key to everything." Kira's breath caught in her throat. "The key? What does that mean? I don't even know who these people are." The captain's gaze hardened. "They've been watching you, Kira. They've been watching your every move. Your birth wasn't just a blessing, it was part of a plan. Your father didn't just create this airline for profit. He built it as a front for something much bigger. And you, Kira, you're the only one who can finish what he started." Kira felt a chill run through her veins. "I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to be involved in whatever this is. My father made his choices, but I'm not him." The captain's expression remained unchanged, his eyes unwavering. "You think you can walk away from this? You think you can simply turn your back on everything that's been built? You're already a part of it. Kira, there's no running from this." Kira took a step back, her mind racing. "No, I don't believe you. I'm not like him. I won't be a puppet in your game." The captain's face tightened, and for the first time, Kira saw something akin to frustration flicker in his eyes. "You don't have a choice. You've always been a part of this. your bloodline, your name, your place in the world. It's all been leading to this moment. Kira felt a wave of nausea rise in her chest. She had been living a lie, a carefully constructed illusion that had shielded her from the truth. And now, everything was coming undone. Her father's empire, his legacy, was nothing but a mask. And behind that mask, there was darkness, something far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. But she wasn't going to be a pawn. She wasn't going to be part of their game. She wasn't going to let them control her life any longer. Kira's resolve solidified, her decision clear. She wasn't going to let her father's mistakes dictate her future. She wasn't going to be the key to their power. She would burn it all down if she had to. I won't be part of this, she said, her voice stronger than ever. I'm done with you, done with this world. I'll take back my life. The captain's expression hardened, his gaze cold and calculating. You think you can escape this? You think you can just walk away? Kira didn't answer. She turned and walked toward the door, her heart pounding with each step. The captain's voice followed her, but she didn't stop. You won't make it out of here. Kira, you don't understand what you're up against. You can't outrun them. You can't hide. Kira didn't look back. She pushed open the door, the cold night air hitting her face as she stepped outside. The city stretched out before her, endless and unforgiving, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't afraid of the past, of the lies, of the danger that lurked in the shadows. She was free. The world had been turned upside down, but she was no longer a part of it. She was going to carve her own path, and she would find her own way out. She would not be the key to their empire. She would be the one to bring it all crashing down. And as she disappeared into the night, the city's lights flickering around her, Kira finally realized the most powerful thing she had was her own will. She didn't need them. She never had. The end.